Well, welcome everyone. We're so excited you're here with us today. What an incredible session you are in for. So I see quite a few people joining us already, and we have some familiar names. Hello, Dr. Weber,
Dr. Weber,
Cheryl, Donna, Julia,
Elizabeth.
Yay, so good to see everyone.
Lexi, Robin.
And we have our incredible keynote, our chef, Abra Berens with us today. So we're really excited for you to meet her and learn more about her. Christina and I have been collectively drooling over her cookbook. I will plug this many times, but just in case, like I'm telling you, if there is one cookbook you need in your collection, like this is the one I recommend to everyone. And it is like a whole lot of work you put into it.
She's a thick girl for sure. It was funny because when I sold the book to Chronicle, the idea was like, oh, this will be just like a little pocket guide to the market, and people can like pop it in their bag and then go to the farmer's market and like whatever. And then when we got it back, there's actually a funny story about there's no Brussels sprout chapter, and it's because I had writing for it and I just like forgot to include it. Like I had added it to the table of content sort of late, and so when I was putting all the different chapters together, it like I just like forgot, and so I got it back and I was like, ooh, I wonder if I can just like add this in. And my editor was like, no. And I was like, what do you mean no? Like, can't we just like put more pages in it? We're like making a book, right? And she was like, it's 465 pages. And I was like, what? Like, well, you wrote a lot. And I was like, yeah, I thought you guys would edit that, And they were like, well, we want to keep all of it. And then I was like, it still seems like a lot of pages. And they were like, well, you also photograph like every dish. And I was like, yeah, because I wanted you to have options. And they were like, yeah, we want to use all of them. And I was like, all right.
What a great problem to have that all of the content you submitted was perfect. I love it. And we have folks gushing about it in chat as well. Love the cookbook, and same joking about the missing Brussels sprouts. So yeah, I think maybe there should be a roughage too, and you could highlight the Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts and sweet potatoes. It'll be like a little pamphlet.
I love it.
And those two go good together too.
It's true. They come out at the same time, for sure. Yeah, we always joke, oh, that'll just be in roughage 2, more to chew. I can't remember where it was, but somebody wrote a review just being like, the food is good, but it requires a lot of chewing. And I was like,
vegetable.
I guess that being a rubric for success, like minimal chewing, but I suppose it's true. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Oh, I love it.
So if you're just joining us, please feel free to shout out, say hi, tell us where you're coming from. We are here for a Q&A. So we also hope that you pose your questions. And I'm telling you, she has so much to share. She is brilliant and creative and innovative and so knowledgeable. So please, please, please make the most of our time and quiz away, because otherwise you'll just have to listen to all the questions Christina and I have for her. So please interact. Tell us how you're doing today. We're looking forward to hearing from you. So Christina, what do you think? Should we kick it off?
Yes, I think we should get started. I see a few people still coming in, but I think we can get started. And as Lizzie said, as we keep going, please type your questions. It can be anything from the talks and the demo that Abra did. They were live on our website, to anything about her book or about her farm. So, but yes, officially, I want to welcome all of you to the annual Foodways Symposium. Today is a wrap. Today we're wrapping up a week of virtual events, virtual cooking demos. It's been lovely connecting with the community. And Lizzie and I have enjoyed talking to our chefs and our speakers and presenters. So for those of us that are new today and that don't know us, Lizzie and I will be your facilitators. I'm Christina Petrovska, and I work at Kalamazoo Valley Community College as Food Systems Program Coordinator. Lizzie, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. If you don't know me, I am Lizzie Luxinger, and I am Program Coordinator of Community, Culinary, and Nutrition. I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Abra.
Thank you, Lizzie. So this event is made possible by the Kalamazoo Valley Foundation. I just want to talk about it's a collaboration between the Kalamazoo Valley Museum and the Bronson Healthy Living campus of Kalamazoo Valley Community College. The program and the activities provide historical, cultural, and practical insights into food and food systems in Southwest Michigan. It serves as a convening point for students, practitioners, and the community to come together to build a strong, vibrant, and local food system. So every year we choose a theme for our Foodways Symposium. It usually has been a cultural component. We've done, in 2019, we had a Middle Eastern foodways. Before that, we had African American foodways. We had a Native American foodways. And this year we decided to kind of take a little bit of a different approach and talk about plant forward foodways and what does that mean, and how a lot of cultures actually intersect around this same component of celebrating plants and celebrating vegetables. And we were very excited that we were able to work with chef Abra Berens, because that's kind of at the core of her work, celebrating vegetables in our region, in our Great Lakes region. So I'm very excited to introduce to you Abra Berens today. She's a chef, former farmer, and a writer. She believes that the meals we eat should change with the seasons and that their ingredients should come from nearby. She strives to make simple, delicious meals that champion the region. She started cooking at the storied Zingerman Deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'd love to hear who has tried their food. It's delicious. So if you have, type in the chat box as well. What a great start to your culinary career. She then went on to train in the Garden Focus Kitchen at Ballymaloe Cookery School in Cork, Ireland. In 2009, she co-founded a bare knuckle farm in Northport, Michigan, where she farmed and cooked for 8 years. After years of farming, she returned to the kitchen full-time, opening and helming the Cafe of Local Foods in Chicago. In 2017, she left the executive chef position to return to the Mitten State to join the team at Grainer Farm in Three Oaks, Michigan, where she combines her love of farms and restaurants to create one-of-a-kind dinners on the farm, celebrating the best of Southwest Michigan's diverse agriculture. Abra, what a wonderful story, and what a wonderful, well-rounded experience, really, from seeing the food being grown on the farm to serving it on the plate. So welcome. And tell us about where are you right now, how are things at Grainer Farm, and how this year has affected the farm and the restaurant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but first of all, I just want to say thank you to you both, and to Rachel, who has been so wonderful in helping coordinate all of this. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you know this was scheduled to happen a year ago, and then a global, once in a generation global pandemic happened, and there's no shortage of work that people have gone through to transition this and to keep programming going. And I think that I have been blown away by the amount of work that you all have done, and also the work that you do on a regular basis to, for community development, food development, job skills training, all of those different things is really, it's been incredible to get to see it and to, let alone to participate in it. So I just want to say thank you at the very outset. And also, Kalamazoo is so lucky to have such an amazing resource. And I think everybody who's here probably already knows that. And so it's a privilege to be able to support in any way that I can. And I think that is, to get back to your question, I think that, we've all gone through a fair amount this year, to put it mildly, and Grainer is no different. We are located in Three Oaks, Michigan, which is about 45 minutes from Kalamazoo. We're in the very southwest corner of the state, kind of closer to New Buffalo, but just south of Benton Harbor. We're about 60 miles from Chicago. And our farm was started in 2006 by Rob Buono and Liz Cacelli, who are a husband and wife team. And Rob's mom did a lot of work in early education, and Liz's family also is a family of educators. And when their girls, Grace and Eleanor, which is how you get Grainer, were kind of about the age that they would have been participants in Rob's mom's school out in Minnesota, which was a school that was based around life cycles and education. They decided that that programming wasn't really available in our area. And so because they have very few ceilings on their sort of vision, they were like, well, let's just build it. And so they started a farm in order to start a farm camp for kids, which is educational programming ages 5 through 12. And every summer we do, several weeks of programming. And it's really a tactile learning place. And so this idea of education has always been part of Grainer. But in addition to that, in order to have a farm camp, you have to have a farm. And so they wanted to, our area is so rich in agriculture, but there is not a ton, or wasn't a ton, especially back, 15 years ago, of organic vegetable production. There's a lot more, it's a pretty open and flat in some areas. And so there's a lot of corn and soy production. There's a lot of fruit production being so close to the lake. Welch's and Gerber both have big presence here in the fruit production. And so they wanted to see more vegetable production. And so those are sort of the two prongs of the farm when it first started. And since then, we have added about 350 acres of organic small grain production. So that's everything. Some corn and heirloom corn and some soy, but mostly things like wheat and rye and barley and oats and all different sorts of grains. And then I joined the team in 2017, as Christina was saying, mostly because it was sort of just luck, really. I had been living in Chicago. My husband's from Chicago, and knew that I wanted to be back in Michigan. We both did, and we were ready. I grew up rurally. He grew up in downtown Chicago, and we were ready to live rurally again. And so we were kind of looking around and trying to figure out where to be. And we really love the Traverse City region, but we also have, deep community ties to Chicago. So we happened to kind of stumble into this area, and we're like, oh, maybe this would work. And then I have a mutual friend with the owners of the farm, and the farm has always wanted to have people on the land itself in order so that people can kind of see how food is produced, and to be, I think you all know the benefit of a community gathering point, and wanted to provide some of that. And so one of their missions is, how do we get even more people to come to the farm itself? And their thought had been, we've got this big farmhouse, maybe we can just do dinners in this large dining room in the farmhouse, not knowing if it would work, not knowing how all of these things would go. And I happen to have a background in on-farm dining because as Christina was saying, my background is that I grew up on a farm. My family were pickle farmers, my dad's side of the family. And then I was working in kitchens, and I was lucky enough to be sort of sent pushed towards going to Ballymaloe, which is on a 100-acre working organic farm. It's a cookery school that started as an offshoot of Ballymaloe House, which was started by Myrtle Allen, whose husband Ivan was a farmer. They had this big old English estate in the south of Ireland that they needed to keep up and to pay for. And so Myrtle said, well, maybe we can put people up, and then they need to feed them. And so they were growing all of this food, and she was making these meals and was so acclaimed in Ireland for making really traditional Irish food. And so for me, I had been cooking for a little while, and my chef mentor friend Roger at Zingerman's had said, you don't really need to go to cooking school, but you do need some foundational training. And so, you should consider going to Ballymaloe. You'd be able to travel. I wasn't going to go into debt to do it, all of these different things. And so it was there that I didn't expect to have my eyes sort of open to what I wanted to do, which was to make food that speaks to a place. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the idea of that's really what I left Ballymaloe with. I left with a lot of practical knowledge of how to make stuff and how to not be an idiot in a kitchen.
It's a tough place. I've heard it's a tough cooking school.
Really what I left with was this idea that, there's a million restaurants in the world, there's a million chefs in the world. but maybe there was a way to use my work to tighten that connection to agriculture and how that food is produced. And that's also Grainer's mission. And I think a big, sort of driving force to that, my friend and coworker, Wesley Reith, often says, 100 years ago, 30% of our population were farmers, and today it's about 3%. And that seems like it's just like inherently negative, and there are some positives to that. But I think the thing I'm most fascinated with is that when we don't have a shared experience with the people who are producing food, it's easy to take that work for granted and to not understand what that is. And if that shows up in not understanding seasonality or not understanding regionality or understanding, like, when a torrential downpour comes through and you've got clayey soil, what that means for growers. And I think we saw that a couple years ago when, most of the state of Michigan hadn't been planted until like the middle of June. And there was just tremendous, need for crop insurance and things like that. I'm getting a little bit into the weeds, but just wanting to find a way to connect people to that experience. And so that's pretty much what I do. That's been my North Star. It's my North Star at Grainer, where I just feel so privileged to get to work, and people can come and do the meals that we do are experiential. So what I mean by that is it's not like a standard restaurant where you just turn up and order what looks good to you. People arrive, they do a tour of the farm, and then they get what I think sounds good, which is
and it is delicious.
Which is a 7-course meal based around what we grow. And so the way that those menus are written is that I get a list of ingredients from the farm, or I do a field walk with Jose Oliveira, who's our field manager, and see what's coming up and then write the menus based on that. So it really is a snapshot of our particular piece of land at a particular moment in time. And then the things that we don't grow, mostly meat and dairy, and some grains we bring in from surrounding farms. Yeah, so that's kind of a long-winded answer. And the way that the pandemic has affected Grainer is, like everybody, I think it was a struggle to figure out, like, how are we going to sell in this new way when we can't have that personal connection, and we can't have people on the farm in the same way. And so a tremendous amount of work by Molly Brew, who manages our farm stand, and our former farm manager, Katie Burdett. They transitioned our entire operation to an online store. And so, all of last year, it was an e-commerce store, and we would upload things from our kitchen and from our fields each week, and people would order it and then they come and pick it up. We are very excited with the sort of wave of vaccinations and sort of just learning how to operate within this pandemic, that we'll be able to open the farm store again this coming year. So we will go back to in-person shopping. But really, I think the thing I've seen the most is the local food movement and the sustainable food movement have been building a foundation of networks, communities, understanding, education, all of those things. And I feel like the pandemic just cemented that for people. Suddenly Americans got a crash course in our food system and food insecurity and food scarcity, and what it means to not sell all of your milk to schools, but instead try to figure out how to package it for retail sales. Those are big shifts that happen in a very short amount of time. And I think that we saw such a tremendous uptick in demand, because I think for the first time, people were scared that they wouldn't be able to get access to quality food, but they also recognize that their dollars are important, and where they spend them is important. And I think they had time to cook. We saw such a huge uptick in home cooking. And so suddenly people had the time and the interest and maybe a little bit of extra money if they, our economy is so stratified that if they had the extra money, they were happy to spend it where it seemed like it was most valued, which, I think is with small businesses. And I think if we didn't have that uptick in money, then people were just figuring out how to stretch their dollars. So that's kind of how it impacted us. We canceled the dining program because we didn't want to, big long tables and sharing food is so critical to how our meals go. And then also we're in the midst of building a new building for to house the dining program. And so we were going to try to convert a barn that gets used for 800 other things to turn it into a dining venue. And I was like, this is like so much work for something that's basically going to be revenue neutral. And I mean, I love hard work, but there's kind of a point where it's like, let's just not do that. And so that was the decision. So I have never been more excited to cook for people again. I just miss it tremendously. And so hopefully there's, brighter futures on the horizon with masking up and getting vaccinated, and then hopefully being able to interact again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a beautiful answer. And thank you for going in depth, I think, from the beginning. It was great to hear kind of like the beginnings of that. We do have a couple of questions that came up. One of them is from Rachel. And Rachel's asking, since you have been both a chef and a farmer, what is one thing you wish chefs knew about farmers and one thing you wish farmers knew about chefs?
Probably that their days start and end at the opposite times.
True.
So true.
Farmers, usually start their days. I know very few farmers who don't wake up much later than 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. And I feel like chefs are often going to bed, not so many hours before that. No, I mean, I jokingly say that, but I do think it's true. I mean, they're just such different ends of the food spectrum. And so for a chef who is demanding perfection out of an inherently agricultural product, I wish that they would have more patience and more understanding at what goes into the work of that. And for farmers, I wish that they understood sometimes the demands of a business that is as hard to control as the weather in a lot of ways for most restaurants. And that if you say you're going to deliver 20 pounds of potatoes, I need you to deliver 20 pounds of potatoes. And if you say you're going to deliver, 10 pounds, that's fine. And then if you have an extra 10, we can work with that. But I think it's just about that communication. Neither industry is really known for their communication skills. And I think that anything like that, and I think it is just about that shared empathy of what the other person is going through. It's actually interesting. I was talking with Abby Klug, who it runs Klug Farms in St. Joe, and she, comes from a farming family, multi-generational farming family. And we were just commiserating about how last summer, it was really rainy during the start of strawberry season, and strawberries just soak up so much water. And so she was getting all of this really angry feedback from chefs who were very stressed already with, restaurants and stuff about how the berries were flavorless and how they were molding so quickly and how she was just selling inferior product. And she was like, it's raining. I don't know how to explain it besides that. And then it was so it was the perfect weather for the other berries, for raspberries, the druplet berries. And she was just like, the raspberries are perfect, but there are people who won't buy them because they had a bad experience with the strawberries. And just how heartbreaking that is. And how I wish chefs understood that their job is to mitigate the agricultural inconsistencies. And I think that farmers' jobs are to mitigate the natural inconsistencies. And everybody's just trying to manage something in that way. Is that for an answer?
It's great. And I think it's this really interesting meeting point. It also kind of reminds me of the home cook, because one of the things I love that you kind of said in your book is instead of approaching it from a chef writing a menu, right? So, or a home cook that's planning their weekly menu. I'm going to sit down on Sunday, I'm going to write what I'm going to cook every night, and then I'm going to go to the grocery store and buy all those ingredients. How do we kind of get away from that script, even as, people in our own homes, and say I'm going to connect with my farmer, maybe it's through my CSA, maybe it's, going to the farm stand, the farmer's market, and really understanding from them, what is good, what is their recommendation, what are their challenges, and then finding a way to get inspired or creative with what is available and what's best in that moment. And that's one of the things Christine and I have talked at length about the book. I'm going to say again, get the cookbook. Because so I'm from culinary, and I'll tell you, sometimes it's it's hard to like find inspiration or think about the variations. Like I get so stuck in like, this is what I'm going to make. And your cookbook, your way of approaching food is like so creative and so in the moment and leveraging like what those strengths are in agriculture in our region. What are some, I don't know, some suggestions you'd have for people? Like, how do you tap into that creativity, or how do you start that conversation with a farmer? How does your mind work? Like, I want to get in there and understand, like, how do you come up with 5 riffs on beets or 6 riffs on carrots? Like, what does that look like for you?
That's interesting. I think that in a lot of ways, the constraints of seasonality are really the sort of jumping off point for creativity for me. There was a time I worked at a bakery in Chicago that was very much tied to the farmers market, but by the time January, February rolled around, the owner was like, look, it's February. We can order, non-local stuff to see us through, because there was just such limited supply. And so all of a sudden it was like, I can get anything I want, and I couldn't come up with a dish idea to like save my life. And I need those constraints. And so if it's, necessity is the mother of invention, I really think that's true. And so I think it's about having some constraints, being open to what you have around you. And it's sort of like, remember how in like junior high, we all had to read The Art of War, I think, and how like there's this, most of that book I don't remember, but I do remember this idea of like, if you're confronted with a problem, sometimes you can just sidestep it. And I think that that's sort of how I feel about it too, is like being open to just like what's in your fridge and not having a preconceived notion of what it should be. And then also I think underpinning that has to be an understanding of technique, which sounds very like didactic, I guess, but what I mean is like how to roast a vegetable, like Batali had in the Babo cookbook, like this idea of like, well, what goes with that? Pretty much anything that's at a farmer's market, toss it in olive oil, salt, and pepper, and roast it until it's caramelized. That pretty much goes with it, and like that's all you need to know. I really do feel that's a good point. And the same is true for like, have a couple of salad dressings that you like to make, have a couple of condiments that you keep on hand, and then they can all just kind of come and go a little bit. It's, it's funny because I'm not very fashionable, like clothes fashion wise. And I find, or like painting a room like fills me with dread because I feel like I won't know like what colors go together. But I think those are all sort of the same thing, which is that, at least for me, you have like a certain, like a black dress, right? The classic black dress example. And then you have like, that looks very different if it's with like a jean jacket and some Chuck Taylors. But then you like put on red heels and like statement necklace and wear that same thing out. And I think the same is true for food. It's like a sweet potato or, a baked potato or whatever. Like you can do a classic baked potato with just butter and sour cream if that's what fits the meal. Or like what we did a couple nights ago is take that baked potato and then make a giant shaved vegetable salad that has like carrots and cabbage and cauliflower and some fresh greens. And then I dressed it all with this like tuna mayo that I think we use on pretty much everything. And it was just this like mountain of shaved raw vegetables, but over top of this like comforting thing of the baked potato. And those look very different, or they work very differently, but they're fundamentally the same thing. So I think it's about, and that's what I was trying to do with roughage. You've been so kind to talk about roughage so much. The way that it works for me, or I guess the way that my brain works, is sort of like start with the ingredients, see what's around you, see what you're interested in, what you're excited to eat. And then you're going to apply some preparation techniques. If it's, keeping it raw or roasting it or grilling it or whatever, like nothing fancy. We're not talking about sous vide or, any of those sorts of things. And then it's just about the accessories that go with it. So, the beets, we wanted to do the beets because I think it just shows, really the breadth of that individual vegetable. So for the demonstration that was pre-aired, the idea of taking the beets and steam roasting them, and then you can turn it into a million different different salads just based on what you have or what you want to pair it with in the season. Or you can blend those beets and turn it into a puree, which you can then use to dress pasta or dress risotto, or you could thin it out to make a soup, or you can put it on a sandwich. Like there's all of these different ways that they can kind of turn up. And so I don't know, it's a little bit hard because it's, Zingerman's had the stages of learning where it's like unconsciously competent, consciously competent, consciously incompetent, and then unconsciously incompetent. And it's really hard to be a teacher who's unconsciously competent, because you're like, it's hard to remember why you do certain things. And so the best teachers are consciously competent. And so I think it's about just learning and figuring it out and then growing that skill set so that you can go to a consciously competent stage, and then you can kind of play around. Sorry, this is getting very off track.
I love it because I think that's a great way to approach, like if you have that fundamental technique where you understand how to saute or braise or puree or whatever, and then you can kind of tap into the creativity, which it feels like you are so comfortable in that creative zone. Like it's really inspiring that if you can tap into the season or the creativity of the elements that you have immediately available in your own home, you can take it so many different directions.
And maybe a part of that is that it's actually like sort of hard to screw food up, like it's because it might not be your favorite way. Like I make stuff all the time where I'm like, that's not my favorite combination, but like we're still fed at the end of the night, thankfully. And so I think that it's a little bit about easing up. I think one of the things that has been frustrating to me with the sort of rise of celebrity chef culture is I feel like there's been this sort of ceding of authority or ceding of power from domestic spaces to a professional space. And that irritates me on a couple of levels. One, and maybe most importantly, is I think, the percentage of people who make food in homes are women. And I feel like it was sort of another example of women who are very competent being told that they're not good enough. And so it happens so often that somebody will say like, I don't know, is this good? I'm like, well, taste it. Does it please you? Then it's good. And it doesn't matter. And it quite frankly doesn't matter if your family likes it. If you like it, then that's good enough. And I think that they're, with cookbooks and with TV chef culture and all those things, ultimately, all of those folks are selling you something. And unfortunately, especially with food, especially with a lot of feminine spheres, we're sort of sold things under the guise of you're not good enough. And I just feel like it's really a shame. And I think that if anything can happen, it's okay to say like, that's not my favorite thing, but it was still a successful meal. Yeah. And then I think having that opens up the creativity because you're not always striving for the gold. You're just doing a daily practice in a lot of ways. And it's interesting because what you were talking about with creativity, I wrote a second cookbook that's coming out this fall called Grist, which is really set up the same way as Roughage, but it's through the lens of grains and legumes. And it was difficult subject matter because in a lot of ways, like you can they all are kind of the same, like barley and farro and buckwheat and bulgur, like you kind of use them interchangeably. So I was like, how are these going to become all separate chapters? But then really what that is it just means like, and there's no seasonality with grains and like some, but like the point is that they're shelf stable. And so, you're able to use buckwheat in the spring, summer, winter, fall. You can use that all year round. And that's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And so then it opens up the creativity of what you pair it with. And it also creates this ultimate flexibility of like, if you have a buckwheat recipe, you're out of buckwheat, you could use bulgur, you could use farro. And there's, some people, gluten is an issue, all those different things. But for the most part, if that's not a concern, you can swap them in and out. And it's the same thing with legumes too. Like if your recipe calls for white beans, but you only have chickpeas, like, and I feel like, we're sort of told this thing of like, it has to be this like very special bean from, the northern, from Machu Picchu. And that's the only one that works. And it's like,
I think that's so important. I love that, like that, ability to just roll with what you have and it's going to be okay. Yeah, that's awesome. We have quite a few questions coming in. Christina, would you like to?
Sure. Yeah, so we have a question that came in earlier, and it's about, do you see and taste the difference between vegetables grown organically as opposed to those that are not?
I think there's a couple ways to look at that. I think it's pretty important that we acknowledge that there have been studies on organic foods saying that there is not a nutritional difference in the quality of those foods. I think that's important for a couple of reasons. One, it's science. And if we're going to believe in science in some parts of our lives, we need to believe in science in all parts of our lives. But I would say that I tend to prioritize organic if I don't know the grower, because it's a stand-in. That certification is a stand-in for me for knowing what that personal grower or what that grower's decisions are. And I think that we have to look at the system as a whole and say, agriculture is a significant contributor to greenhouse emissions and climate change and climate collapse. And so organic provides an option that is less detrimental to the planet. It is also less detrimental to some of the people who are working with that food. And so it's not good enough to just say, I'm looking at, in my opinion, this is again, all my opinion. It's not good enough for me to look at the food and say, is this what I'm going to put into my body? And I'm going to make choices on that, because it has to also be tied to the land, and it has to be tied to the workers who are producing that food. And as someone who grew up in fruit country, I think there's been a significant impact on mixing cherry chemicals and the people who spray those chemicals year in and year out. Do I think it's negligence on chemical companies? I'm not quite ready to say that, but I do worry about that. I think about that with meat production a lot, that there are some people who grow, who are, ranchers and beef producers who don't go through an organic certification. Maybe that means that their cows are all grass fed and they're still slaughtered in a small independent slaughterhouse. I am perfectly fine ordering and eating that beef. I don't eat a ton of beef anymore, but that's where I would get it. I am not comfortable with buying meat that contributes to climate collapse. And also, we've seen it with the COVID-19, those massive slaughterhouses, which are a product of consolidation in the industry, have been hotbeds for transmission. They're a hotbed for personal injury for the workers. And quite frankly, I don't think that the owners of those businesses really care. And that's not good enough for me. Yeah. But I come from a very privileged place where I have part of my income that I can easily dedicate to food. I think about food a lot. I have access to good food. I like the food and can afford the food that's in my grocery store. And I think that it is not my place to dictate those decisions for people who are not in that privileged space. If you are in that privileged space, I do think it's your responsibility to pay attention to how your choices impact our larger community. But it's a very complicated question. Mm-hmm. And I think that you can't talk about organic versus conventional without talking about class, without talking about access, without talking about why part of our population chooses to spend the least amount of their disposable income on food than we ever have in our history, while still wanting food to be accessible to people who are having trouble getting it. So it's a big ball of wax. And I think that the most important thing you can do is to spend time deciding for yourself what's important to you and how your choices are going to affect that down the scale. So it's not an easy one. But as far as, do I notice a flavor difference or a nutritional difference? I think that any sort of flavor difference is coming from the quality of the grower. And I say this in the asparagus chapter that I don't have a preference between skinny asparagus or fat asparagus, but I will always buy asparagus from a grower who separates them, because it means that they're bringing a level of meticulousness and fastidiousness to their work that is going to create a higher quality product. And that's just the amount of care that someone's putting into it.
That was a beautiful answer. Thank you. That was really beautifully answered. And I agree, it's a really complex, and I feel like we could probably have a whole session just talking about this. And thank you for thank you for bringing in some important topics like privilege and accessibility. I think that's really important to bring in those conversations. So Laura also asked, have you explored starting a vegetable cookery school here?
Not directly, but it is something, one of the reasons why I really love being at Grainer is the dedication to education. Wasn't intended to rhyme, but it does. And I, thinking about, for me, that desire to educate has been primarily focused on the people that I hire to work with me, and to try to provide a space for young chefs, or not even young, but green chefs, to come in and really learn what it means to cook from a farm year round. I think we have a lot of people who work in sort of a farm to table mentality, but who don't understand, like right now we're in a garlic gap. There's no garlic on our farm because I preserved, there's some I preserved and confit a bunch of the very ends of our garlic, and we won't have a garlic product again until the green garlic, which is the, fresh shoot of the garlic plant, is a little bit bigger. And so that means you have to change your recipes, or you have to buy garlic in, which is not a failing. But what does it mean to say, like, oh, actually this thing, we're not going to make it because we don't have the garlic. And why don't we have garlic, or why don't we have onions right now, or tomato paste, or things like that. And so I think that's where the education has been placed originally. But I am really excited with the growth that's happening at Grainer. We also have a new schoolhouse for farm camp, and also hope to have more educational classes for adults and things like that. So there is more of that, but nothing totally structured yet.
Thank you. We have a question from Julia, and congratulations. So Julia says, congratulations on the Michigan Notable Book Honor. How did you feel when you heard Roughage was selected? Do you feel the award is providing you with an additional opportunity to share the importance of local food, seasonal eating?
Yeah, it was such an honor. I think Julia knows this about me already, but I have a deep and long-standing love for libraries, mostly because they've been such supports for me through my life. I remember riding my bike from my house growing up to the, Burnups Library, which was just a portable trailer in a parking lot, and getting books all summer long. And then also when we started our farm in Northport, we didn't have internet. Rural access to internet is a really big issue. And we were trying to run a business not having internet in 2009. And so the library had Wi-Fi, and they realized that we were coming to the library at like 8 and 9 o'clock to send invoices, or, send newsletters and things like that. So they left the Wi-Fi on for us so that we could sit outside at any point to be able to use it. And that's just like, it's such grace that and it's such a, I don't know, what do you call a thing that's just there to provide? They're not asking for anything. They're, all these things. And so I just feel that way about libraries. So to have and plus libraries are full of people who read and who love books, and so like, if there's like an award by people who don't read books, that feels a little bit less meaningful than people who read books all day and champion books. So it was just such an honor. And then also to be able to it was supposed to happen in person, but we did a lot of virtual library visits. There's so many communities where libraries are really the center information sharing and gathering space, and it just feels like an unending privilege to get to work with them. And so speaking to that end, I am really excited. I think that one of the plus sides of the pandemic is that we do have some of these new tools, like virtual symposiums, and we did the Leelanau County Libraries, which is a collection of 4 libraries up in northern Michigan. We did a month-long cooking class with them in February, and that then led to what's going to be an ongoing series of interviewing other cookbook authors, and that programming is accessible for anybody. You don't have to be in Leelanau County to do it. So the next one's actually on Monday, And so I think if you go to my Instagram in the link tree, there's a link for the Leelanau County Library Talks. And that on Monday is going to be with Evan Hansor, who is a chef in Brooklyn. And he runs an organization called Tables of Contents. And it is a event series that combines literature and food. And so there's always literature readings and then food that's based around that. And he's just one of the most thoughtful voices in food and restaurants and literature right now. And so I hope if you guys can make it on Monday night, that would be great. But hopefully there'll be more of that sort of programming coming through libraries as well.
I'm going to put an updated, so we put your link tree in, and I'm going to put an updated link to Leelanau Library in chat too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abra. We have another question about your tuna dressing. So is the tuna dressing you mentioned actually Tornado from Six Season Cookbook? Love, love, love.
It's very similar. And it's funny, we were just talking about, I think Josh McFadden and I, we come at very similar topics from sort of different perspectives. And I think that maybe sums it up, that he grew up in kitchens that were very Italian focused. So he knows it as Tornado. And for me, it's always been tuna mayo because I came up in kitchens that were very Midwestern focused. So the first time I had tuna mayo was when I was working for Paul Verant at V Restaurant out in Western Springs, Illinois. And we were doing a fried green tomato dish that had this tuna mayo underneath. And it sounds terrible, but it's so delicious. And it is like, you basically make a mayonnaise and then plunk a can of tuna in at the end. And so it's not like tuna salad, I think, is like mostly tuna and a little bit of mayo. And this is the opposite of that. So it's a condiment, but it's like, it's rich and flavorful and protein packed. And one of my husband and my favorite meals is that in the summer or in the winter, we'll just do a giant platter of vegetables. If it's like cut up carrots and cauliflower florets and cherry tomatoes and some roasted sweet potato and some sauteed broccoli and, all of those different things. And then we'll just dip it into a couple of different sauces. And so it feels really decadent because these sauces are really rich. Like if it's the tuna mayo, or there's a recipe for bagna cauda, which is a warm anchovy, garlic, and butter sort of dressing, or like hummuses, things like that. It feels like you're eating all of this rich stuff, but really you're eating like a giant platter of vegetables for dinner. And so, yeah, it's so good. And actually Josh has a grains cookbook coming out this fall as well. And it feels like endlessly flattering to be mentioned in the same sentence as him and Martha Holmberg, who is his co-author. So yeah, it's going to be a good fall for cookbooks this year.
Woohoo, something to look forward to.
And the recipes are page 60 and 61 for those who have the book, both for the bagna cauda and the mayo and the varieties of different mayos.
And if anyone doesn't have access to the book, or they're not in a place in life right now where they want to spend, $30 on a cookbook, you can always email us or me. My email is berens.abra@gmail.com. I'm happy to send you PDFs of any of the recipes. Like I was saying earlier, it's a hard thing when you're in an industry where you're effectively selling something. But I think the way to undercut that is that, if somebody really wants to make tuna mayo and I can send you a PDF of it, I'm happy to do that. And so I really feel like chefs' jobs are to encourage people to cook at home. And so anything that helps do that, I'm happy to do.
So generous and gracious. Thank you, Chef.
Thank you. And I'll share your email in the chat box as well.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Earlier, when you were talking about the strawberries, we had some questions about some of the berries that you referenced, like druplet berries or others. So would you be willing to kind of share what are some of your favorite seasonal berries, or what are some things we should look for that might be different or new?
Oh man, I mean, that's the thing about Michigan, is that this is something people don't often know, but we're the second most agriculturally diverse state in the nation, second to California. And I think a lot of that comes on the back of fruit growers. We grow such a tremendous amount of fruit in this country, or in the state, let alone this country. I think for me, it's just about the changes. So like rhubarb will be coming in soon. And I really love really tart fruit, like, cause you can put some sugar with it, but it's like, you want it to really cut through that richness. Cause I feel like fruit does so well with rich things. And I like that acidity to kind of cut through. I think yeah, strawberries are like gonna come on shortly thereafter. And I don't know, I mean, it's funny, I'm actually, this isn't gonna be like a cookbook plug session, but I'm working on a third cookbook right now that I'm writing come out in spring of 2023, which is about fruit and the mixture of, it'll be 50% sweet recipes and 50% savory recipes. And with the sweet recipes, I was sort of like, I don't know, what do you do besides just put them in a bowl and put some cream and a little bit of salt and sugar on them? And it turns out like that's pretty much what I like to do with raw ones. And then you can change it up a little bit. But that's kind of how I like fruit is. And that's what this third book will be. Each of the books have like a strong pantry or a condiment section or, you know, all of those sorts of things. And the fruit book will have a baker's toolkit. I'm not a gifted baker. So what I end up doing is relying on sort of a handful of recipes that are very riffable, depending on what fruit you pair them with. So if that's, you know, like I have one ice cream based recipe and I use that to either make a variety of different flavored ice creams by adding other flavors to it, or just using it as a custard, or using that custard to make semifreddo or to make you know, fruit fool. And so it can kind of become a lot of different desserts based around that fruit. So let's see. So yeah, in the druplet berries, that's also like one of my favorite words that I discovered while writing this book is that I was like, how do you put like blackberries, raspberries, you know, black raspberries, all of those together? And that's apparently the word for them is druplet berries. Mulberries are in that category too. And it's the berries that have like a center cone and then individual little
Seeds, kind of
pockets around a seed. I don't know. I still have some more research to do so that I'm not writing the word juice pocket.
It works. We understand.
And then also the stone fruits. I mean, I think if I had to choose a family of fruits, it would be a pretty like hard toss up between the stone fruits, which are, you know, cherries, nectarines, peaches, all of those. And then also the pome fruits, which are apples, pears. And I really love quince. And there's more and more people growing quince again, which is really fantastic.
Great. Oh my God, you're the second person that I've heard in Michigan talk about quince. I feel like I where I come from in Macedonia, they're very common. And it was one fruit that I didn't know the name of. And I was like, it's just kind of fuzzy and it looks like an apple, but it's bigger.
Trying to describe a quince to someone who's never seen a quince is like, you're just guaranteed to sound like a crazy person. Be like, it's kind of like an apple, but it's rock hard and it's in fuzz. And you can't eat it until it's like a little bit rotten. It's like, what? Macedonia is the birthplace of quince. It's from, you know, those hard scrabble places in that part of the world. So you're coming from good stock.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that it was one of the original places. But my dad makes jam out of it. He shreds it. And so he usually, that would be like one of our main jam staples for the winter. Very flavorful.
It's so flavorful. And it's just this amazing, you know, like when people talk about ambrosia and like the fruit of the gods, like I feel like quince is right up there because it's so floral smelling. But then it has this like just wonderful, rich flavor that is not like, I mean, it's like kind of like rose water, but kind of like citrus and all of those different, oh, I love it so much. And I think that's the real beauty of food. I mean, I don't think that food, will just bring us all together and like plaster over our differences. But I do think that there's something to the point of everybody, you know, God willing, can eat and needs to eat. And everybody has something to contribute to the conversation. And I think that even in a household, if you grew up not in a family that cooks, you still ate stuff and you still have references to it. And so I think it's a really good tool for listening to others and trying to empathize with their experiences a bit more.
Beautiful. Thank you. We have a question that came from Anne, and she said, for those who need to limit fat in our diets, what alternatives to dress our vegetables do you suggest?
I think, what would I say? Because I think that you do need some fat with vegetables. A lot of the micronutrients are fat soluble. And so I think that for me to try to cut fat out of all vegetable cookery will be difficult. So then I think it's about looking at which fats you are going to work better for your body. And so if that means non-animal fats, then I would say, olive oil, especially like good olive oil, is a really great option. I think coconut oil is becoming more and more available and more sustainably produced. I think you could look at some of the omega-3 fatty acids that are in things like flax seeds or chia seeds and think about making, or nuts in general, soaking cashews and then blending them into a dressing. There's a really wonderful recipe on the internet somewhere for a tofu dressing, which is silken tofu that's blended with some lemon and salt, I think. So you can find alternatives in that way. I think if I were to, I'm in the same boat as everybody else in trying to manage weight and manage health and yet not let it kind of dictate my life. It's a fine line to walk. I think I try to cut fat out of other places and then keep it with the vegetables. So if that means, instead of, I really love pork. And I sometimes will eschew pork to have, a bagna cauda that we were talking about earlier is like a butter, anchovy, olive oil, garlic dip. Because sometimes those fats make me feel better. Unfortunately, I also really love Danishes. And so I try to cut the Danishes out and then keep the olive oil or the pork chop in place of that. So I don't know. It's a really complicated thing. So I would say just try to honor whatever your body wants. And I think that it's a hard thing. I think I write this in the book. One of the concerns about vegetable and plant-based eating is that it can come off as sort of like pious or like the moral choice. And I don't know that it is. I think it's just about what your body craves versus what it actually wants. And I wake up pretty much every morning wanting a cinnamon roll. I'm
not alone. What?
Coffee. And so sometimes we'll go to bed and he's like, oh, when we wake up, we get to have coffee. And I'm like, ooh, when we wake up, we can have cinnamon rolls. And so I feel like, but I know when I eat a cinnamon roll, I feel really terrible afterwards. And so it's really nice in the moment. And sometimes I want to feel terrible. Sometimes it's like a Sunday and I don't have to do anything else. And I'm just going to like watch a movie all day. Like then I'll have a cinnamon roll in the morning. But otherwise, having something, I really like having like a hard-boiled egg and a vegetable salad for breakfast. And that makes me actually feel better later in the day. So it took me a long time to realize that there's a difference between what I want and what I need. And so I tried to adjust in that way and then not be so hard on myself when I have some mayo with the carrots or whatever. I don't know. It's not a great answer.
No, it's good.
No, I love it.
In your book, you say, and I just found it because it stuck with me in your introduction, you say, I love meat and dairy and sweets, but I know that it is vegetables that keep me together.
Yeah, it's just like the Popeye reference.
Totally. I mean, it's true. And I think I feel very lucky that I also enjoy eating produce. And I think maybe that was a big change for me with farming, which was that we were really broke. We were really poor starting that farm. And so we were eating what we grew, mostly because it was what we could afford. And then I went back to Chicago and I used to work every fall around Thanksgiving at this pie shop, Who's Your Mama Pie Company, which if you're ever in Chicago, they're amazing pies. And I was like, I'm going back to work and I'm going to get paid and I can eat as much pie as I want. I can make as much coffee as I want and it's all free. And I'm like so happy. And then I just, after like a week of endless pie eating, and so then I like went to the store and, I had been like pretty much subsisting on carrots, kale, and eggs for the last 2 weeks of that fall. And all of a sudden I was like, I really miss eating carrots, kale, and eggs. And so I went to the store and like bought some vegetables and felt better. And I was like, something to this I should probably listen to. I'm not like 19 anymore where I can just eat like a full pecan pie every day and like not be bothered.
I love it. Well, we are getting close to time, and I do want to ask you, for folks who want to connect, after today's session, what are ways they can interface at the farm? I see your CSA is sold out, so congratulations. Will the farm store be up? What do you think? What's the future there?
Yeah, so right now our farm store is available every week. The store goes live online at greenerfarm.com on Tuesdays at noon, and then it's for pickup on Fridays. So it's pretty limited right now. And then starting Memorial Day weekend, we have our annual seedling sale, and that's going to be when we transition, as far as I know. And there are conversations, happening with the people who actually manage this part of our farm. So I hope that this is accurate. That starting Memorial Day weekend, we will be open to the public again on Fridays and Saturdays, and that will go through Thanksgiving time. And then we'll reassess what our winter goals are. But I'm pretty sure that we will, the goal is to be a year-round resource for people for local food. And so I think that's the plan, but things change. But yeah, Memorial Day is the real kickoff to in-person dining, or in-person shopping. And then we hope to bring the dining program back. The things that we're kind of waiting on are again, pandemic stuff, but then I think restaurants have shown that you can host people safely. So then we just need the building that we're going to host people in to be up and going. So that'll be a little bit of a slower transition, but we'll get there. And so I hope to see people at the farm at some point. And then for me personally, I will be doing more of, sort of virtual events, which are posted. I've been a little bit lax at posting to my website, but I don't know, they're around at different places, or people, again, you can email me to happy to do it. Sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to get back just because there are days when I'm in a kitchen all day and I don't usually have my computer, but if you're, patient with me on that, and then I'll hopefully get back to you. But how does that work for you guys? What's your spring and summer look like in Kalamazoo with farmers markets and CSA and all of your programming?
Yeah, so the farmers market starts, I think they're having a soft opening on April 24th, and then it officially starts in May. And the farmers market this year is at Mayor Riverfront Park because they are renovating. They're, building out some of our traditional farmers market space. What are your thoughts, Christina?
Right. So I think our farmers market has been increasing in demand, and I think the parking lot was getting overflown every year. So I think the remodeling to accommodate for more people to visit. We have a really vibrant farmers market here in Kalamazoo. As far as programming, I think both Lizzie and I are kind of excited to start having some sort of maybe potentially in-person events, but we're doing a lot of virtual. Lizzie is working on a program with kids this summer, culinary education for kids.
We're doing six-week programs with high school youth, which is a virtual cook along, and then we're doing weekly groceries for the students. So we're going to provide them food to cook, and then we're all going to cook along. So if anyone's out there with any high school students that want to join our cooking program, I'll put a link in chat, and registration should be up next week. So
that's so exciting. That's such a cool idea.
It'll be fun. So from May through August, we'll be cooking. I'm excited. I can't wait. Right? Yeah, weekly, sometimes 2 times a week. So It'll be great. Yeah.
And we're also working with the city of Kalamazoo on a citywide gardening project. So cities basically donating gardening kits to 3 different neighborhoods, and we're working with the city to provide kind of a curriculum to go with urban container gardening concept. So there's a lot of energy both in the culinary and the gardening kind of world. And I think you're right. I think this pandemic has made people think more about, the skills about cooking and self-sufficiency and how can I produce this myself. Yeah. So pretty exciting spring and summer coming up.
Well, and what a gift to have, such capable people already making that programming available to really capture that need. So thanks for doing the work maybe even before people realized that they wanted access to that programming, and just for continuing on with it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abra.
It's been such a treat. I don't want this hour to end, but sadly it has. So I'm going to go mourn the end of this great chat, but thank you. This was absolutely incredible.
Well, It's my pleasure and privilege again, and thanks for thinking of me. And just know, Michigan is such a great state, and I think there's only more collaboration and cooperation that we can do across the state. And I think that that's true of, our friends in Detroit. Keep Growing Detroit was just able to purchase their area, and the work that Lola Gibson is doing there, and Davida Davidson with Food Lab Detroit, and the culinary school up in Traverse City, it's just everywhere. There's so many good things happening, and it's really, I've never been prouder to be a Michigander, and that's really, because of all the work that you other Michiganders are doing. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We'll have this session on our website. Give us 2 or 3 weeks. We are going to close caption it, and we're going to post it on the website. Will be available for viewing later. Most of the other sessions will be also available. So that's one of the beauties of a virtual event. We can record them and have them archived. This was the wrap for 2021, the Foodways Symposium. Stay tuned for next year. We'll start planning next week. Really, we finish one event and start planning right away.
Downtime.
So thank you for following along, and have a wonderful rest of the weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye.